Deep within the hunter's dream, beneath a sky that bleeds crimson and pale, there descends a figure unlike any other in the twisted cosmos of Bloodborne. Its form defies comprehension, a grotesque marriage of human anatomy and eldritch horror. Tentacles writhe where hair should be, ribs stretch into impossible configurations, and where a face should reside, there exists only a gaping void. This is the Moon Presence, known in whispered reverence as Flora, and it stands as perhaps the single most enigmatic entity in all of Yharnam's nightmare-soaked history. To understand the Moon Presence is to grapple with questions that have no clear answers, to peer into mysteries that From Software deliberately left shrouded in shadow. It is the puppet master behind the hunter's dream, the architect of an eternal cycle, and possibly the salvation or damnation of humanity itself. Some scholars of Yharnam's lore believe it to be a benevolent guardian, desperately seeking to halt the spread of the scourge that transforms men into beasts. Others see it as a cosmic manipulator, binding hunters to an endless dream for purposes beyond mortal understanding. And still others propose that the Moon Presence might be something else entirely, a manifestation of blood itself, or perhaps even the formless god Udin given fleeting shape. What we know for certain is this: the Moon Presence is one of the Great Ones, those incomprehensible beings that exist on a plane beyond human perception. It was summoned, beckoned into our reality through means both arcane and terrible. It created the hunter's dream as a sanctuary and prison in equal measure. It bound the first hunter, Gehrman, to an eternity of servitude. And it stands as the final barrier between a hunter and true transcendence, appearing only when a hunter has consumed enough forbidden knowledge to resist its influence. But who is the Moon Presence, really? What drives this creature that seems to embody the very moon itself? What does it want from humanity, from the hunters it conscripts into service? These questions have haunted players since Bloodborne's release, and while we may never have definitive answers, we can piece together fragments of truth from item descriptions, environmental storytelling, and the cryptic words of those few who glimpsed the cosmic reality lurking behind Yharnam's facade. Let us begin our descent into this mystery, peeling back layers of obscurity to examine what can be known about Flora, the nameless moon presence that beckons hunters into dreams and nightmares alike. The form of madness, appearance, and symbolism. When the moon presence descends from the pale sky of the hunter's dream, what strikes observers first is the wrongness of its form. This is not merely an alien creature. It is a being that seems assembled from contradictory elements, a cosmic joke played upon the very concept of anatomy. The moon presence appears to be constructed primarily from human flesh and bone, yet this familiarity only heightens the horror of what has been done to these familiar components. The creature's body is dominated by an enormous spine and rib cage, stretched and elongated far beyond human proportions. These bones are not merely oversized, they seem to pulse with an inner light, as if the very structure that should provide support has become something alive and aware. The ribs curve outward in ways that suggest both wings and a cage, perhaps symbolizing the dual nature of the hunter's dream itself, which serves as both sanctuary and prison for those who enter it. Where limbs should be, the moon presence possesses long skeletal appendages that seem to shift between arms and something more insectile. These limbs end in grasping extremities that appear fragile, yet move with terrifying speed and precision. When the creature attacks, these appendages blur through the air, defying the physics that should govern such movements. There is something almost graceful about its violence, a terrible beauty in the way it strikes. But it is the moon presence's head, or rather the absence of what should be there, that truly captures the imagination and provokes the deepest unease. Where a skull and face should exist, there is instead a mass of writhing tentacles, dozens upon dozens of them, flowing and curling like living hair. These tentacles are not uniform. They vary in thickness and length, some black as midnight, others bearing hints of crimson that match the blood moon from which the creature descends. They move constantly, never still, as if sensing the world through means beyond conventional sight or smell. Within this mass of tentacles, no eyes can be discerned. Instead, there exists only a void, a hole that seems to lead into infinite darkness. This absence of a face is perhaps the moon presence's most disturbing feature, for it denies us any point of recognition or connection. We cannot read emotion or intent in features that do not exist. We cannot meet its gaze because it has no eyes to meet. This facelessness renders the creature utterly alien, impossible to comprehend through the usual means by which we understand other beings. Trailing behind the moon presence is a tail composed of more tentacles, creating the impression of a comet as it moves. This tail undulates and flows, sometimes spreading wide to fill the space behind the creature, other times coiling tightly as if preparing to strike. The movement is hypnotic, drawing the eye even as the mind recoils from what it witnesses. The color palette of the moon presence reinforces its otherworldly nature. Its flesh appears pale, almost luminescent, as if it has never known the touch of true sunlight. The bones visible beneath this skin seem to glow faintly, casting dim light in the darkness of the hunter's dream. The tentacles shift between deep black and dark red, colors that evoke both the night sky and the blood that flows through Yharnam's streets. There is no warmth in this being's appearance, no invitation to approach. It is cold, distant, and utterly inhuman, despite its use of recognizably human components. Interestingly, some lore enthusiasts have noted that the moon presence's design may represent specific parts of human anatomy in exaggerated symbolic form. One interpretation suggests Flora could symbolize the cerebral blood supply system, particularly the Circle of Willis, which maintains constant blood flow to the brain even during emergencies. Those who propose this reading point to the creature's most distinctive attack, where it drains the hunter's vitality to a single point. This sudden health drain, they argue, mirrors how the circulatory system redistributes blood during crisis. Following this anatomical lens, the moon presence might represent something even more unsettling, a literal embodiment of blood itself, or perhaps of the systems that govern blood's flow through living bodies. In a game where blood serves as currency, medicine, and curse all at once, such symbolism would carry profound weight. Under this interpretation, the moon presence becomes not merely a great one interested in blood, but rather the very concept of blood given terrible form. The creature's appearance also draws heavily from the works of H.P. Lovecraft, particularly entities like Nyarlathotep, the Crawling Chaos. Lovecraft's cosmic horrors are characterized by their incomprehensibility, their existence on planes beyond human understanding, and their tendency to drive mortals mad through mere exposure to their true nature. The moon presence embodies all these qualities. Its form suggests something that should not exist, assembled according to rules foreign to our reality. To look upon it is to witness the impossible made manifest. Yet for all its horror, there is something almost tragic about the moon presence's appearance. Unlike the grotesque, deliberately monstrous designs of many other great ones and beasts in Bloodborne, Flora seems almost delicate in places. The way its tentacles move can appear almost gentle at times. The creature seems to float more than fly, giving it an ethereal quality that contrasts sharply with the brutal efficiency of its attacks. This dichotomy between apparent fragility and devastating power mirrors the contradictions inherent in the moon presence's role within Bloodborne's narrative. When the moon presence descends from the blood moon, its arrival is heralded by a shift in the very atmosphere of the hunter's dream. The moon itself becomes visible in the sky, hanging low and red, casting everything in a crimson light. The creature emerges from this moon as if the celestial body serves as a doorway between realms. This entrance reinforces the connection between the moon presence and the blood moon that appears throughout Bloodborne, suggesting that the two may be inextricably linked, perhaps even aspects of the same cosmic force. The environment reacts to the moon presence's arrival. The flowers that carpet the hunter's dream seem to bend away from it, as if even these simple plants recognize something fundamentally wrong in the creature's existence. The air itself seems to thicken, becoming harder to breathe, as if the space occupied by the moon presence displaces not just physical matter, but the very essence of normality. In the few statues found throughout Yharnam and the hunter's nightmare that appear to depict the moon presence, the creature is shown in a surprising pose. cradling something in its arms. These statues, found most prominently in the lumen flower gardens, suggest a nurturing aspect to the moon presence that contradicts its fearsome appearance. What it cradles remains unclear, but many believe it could be a child, possibly representing the offspring that all great ones lose and yearn to replace. If this interpretation holds, these sculptural representations add another layer to our understanding of Flora, hinting at a maternal or protective instinct buried beneath the horror of its form. The moon presence's physical manifestation raises profound questions about the nature of the Great Ones themselves. Are they choosing to appear in forms comprehensible to humans, even if those forms inspire madness? Or are these the shapes they naturally possess, evidence that reality operates according to different principles beyond the veil of human perception? The moon presence, with its amalgamation of human anatomy twisted into alien configurations, suggests something in between, a being that exists partially in our realm and partially in dimensions we cannot fathom. Its form a compromise between its true nature and what can exist in our plane of reality. Flora, the name behind the presence. In the Japanese version of Bloodborne, the moon presence is referred to as Tsuki no Momono, which translates to moon demon or moon fiend. This title emphasizes the creature's connection to the moon and its supernatural, otherworldly nature. However, in the game's lore, this entity is also known by another name, one that carries very different connotations: Flora. The name Flora comes to us through the plain doll, that enigmatic companion who serves and guides hunters in the dream. In one of her dialogue options, the doll can be heard praying, and her words reveal this hidden name. "O Flora, of the moon, of the dream," she intones, her voice carrying a reverence that stands in stark contrast to the horror of the being she addresses. This prayer suggests a relationship between the doll and the moon presence that goes beyond mere servitude, hinting at genuine devotion or perhaps even affection. Flora is a name rich with meaning and historical significance. In Roman mythology, Flora was the goddess of flowers and spring, a divine figure associated with renewal, fertility, and the cyclical nature of life and death. Her festival, the Floralia, was celebrated between April 28th and May 3rd, marking a time when flowers bloomed and nature awakened from winter's slumber. The festival was known for its joyous celebrations, featuring games, theatrical performances, and symbolic acts meant to ensure good harvests and continued fertility. The choice of this name for the moon presence is deeply ironic and multi-layered. On the surface, naming an eldritch horror after a goddess of flowers seems almost comical, a deliberate mismatch between form and designation. Yet when we consider the deeper implications, the name begins to make a terrible kind of sense. The hunter's dream, where the moon presence resides and rules, is carpeted with white flowers. These blossoms, later revealed to be lumen flowers, create a sea of pale blooms that stretches to the horizon. A hunter first awakens in the dream surrounded by these flowers, and the final confrontation with the moon presence takes place in a field absolutely thick with them. This connection between flora and flowers extends beyond mere decoration. In Bloodborne's symbolic language, flowers often represent connection to the cosmos and the Great Ones. Various flowers throughout the game possess properties that hint at their supernatural nature. Some reach toward the stars, as if yearning for something beyond the earthly realm. Others bloom only in the presence of cosmic forces, serving as indicators of nearby Great Ones or their influence. The lumen flowers of the hunter's dream, therefore, are not simply beautiful scenery. They are evidence of Flora's presence and power, a garden cultivated by or for this strange goddess. The association of Flora with renewal and cycles takes on darker significance when considered in context of the hunter's dream's function. The dream operates as an eternal cycle, with hunters living, dying, and reviving in an endless loop. They wake in flowers, they die and return to those same flowers, over and over without end. This is not the joyous renewal of spring that the Roman flora represented, but rather a twisted parody of it. A cycle that brings not growth, but stagnation, not true life, but a dream state existence that denies both the peace of death and the vitality of true living. Furthermore, The concept of fertility associated with Flora connects to one of Bloodborne's central themes, the desperate attempts of Great Ones to procreate and their consistent failure to do so. Every Great One loses its child and yearns for a surrogate, as multiple item descriptions tell us. The Moon Presence, as Flora, would embody this tragic irony, a goddess of fertility rendered sterile by her very nature, forced to seek surrogate children through elaborate schemes involving hunters, dreams, and contracts written in blood. There exists scholarly debate about whether Flora is truly the Moon Presence's name or simply how the doll refers to the entity. Some argue that the doll may be using Flora in the general sense, referring to plant life or the cosmic gardens of lumen flowers, rather than addressing the Moon Presence by a personal name. However, the specificity of her phrasing, "O Flora of the Moon of the Dream," strongly suggests she is indeed naming a specific entity, linking it directly to both the moon and the dream itself. Interestingly, in earlier versions of the game, a note in the lecture building referred to the Moon Presence as Nameless. The note read, "The nameless Moon Presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, Pale Blood." This descriptor of nameless created confusion among lore enthusiasts, as it seemed to contradict the name Flora revealed through the doll's prayer. Some community discussions suggest the nameless descriptor may have been part of earlier design intentions, with From Software later choosing to give it the name Flora through the doll's dialogue. Whether this represents a deliberate narrative evolution or simply reflects the game's intentional ambiguity remains a topic of ongoing debate. This decision to name the creature Flora rather than leaving it nameless represents a significant choice in the game's narrative design. To name something is to define it, to give it boundaries, and make it comprehensible in some small way. An unnamed cosmic horror remains utterly alien, beyond all human understanding or categorization. But Flora, despite its otherworldly nature, becomes something slightly more graspable through this naming. It suggests that the Great Ones, while incomprehensible in many ways, are not entirely beyond the reach of human language and thought. The name also hints at a possible feminine aspect to the Moon Presence, though gender, as we understand it, likely has no meaning for such beings. Nevertheless, the association with a goddess, with fertility and cyclical renewal, with the nurturing of gardens and the cradling of lost children, creates an impression of femininity that colors our interpretation of the creature's motives and methods. Where we might expect aggression and conquest from a masculine-coded cosmic horror, Flora presents a more subtle approach: cultivation, binding, nurturing, and endless patience. Some creative interpretations have extended the meaning of Flora beyond the mythological reference to encompass its meaning in biology, the collection of bacteria and microorganisms that inhabit a body. In this reading, Flora represents the old blood itself, the microorganisms that infect Yharnam's citizens and transform them into beasts. As the embodiment of blood or blood systems, the Moon Presence would literally be the flora, the living culture that has taken root in Yharnam. This biological interpretation meshes well with the anatomical symbolism discussed earlier, creating a cohesive picture of the Moon Presence as blood made manifest, the disease and cure rolled into one terrifying package. The name Flora also invites comparison to other named Great Ones in Bloodborne. Murgo, Kos, Ebrietas, Uidan, each name carries weight and meaning, often hinting at the nature or role of the entity in question. Flora's name, with its associations to growth, cycles, and natural processes, distinguishes it from Great Ones, whose names evoke mystery, sorrow, or otherworldly concepts. It is, paradoxically, the most earthly name given to any Great One, rooting this cosmic entity in concepts familiar to human civilization. The doll's relationship with Flora, revealed through her prayers, opens another avenue of inquiry. The doll herself is a creation born from Gehrman's grief and loneliness, modeled after Lady Maria, and given life through some connection to the Great Ones. That she prays to Flora suggests either gratitude for her existence or understanding of who truly animates her clockwork form. Perhaps the Moon Presence granted the doll true consciousness, or perhaps the doll recognizes Flora as the source of the dream that gives her purpose. Either way, the doll's devotion to Flora stands as one of the few genuine displays of positive emotion directed toward any Great One in the game. When the player defeats the moon presence in the childhood's beginning ending, the doll's behavior afterward becomes especially poignant. She finds the slug-like creature that the hunter has become and gently picks it up, cooing over it with maternal affection. This mirrors the statues depicting Flora cradling something in her arms. Has the doll learned this nurturing behavior from Flora? Is she acting as Flora's proxy, continuing the Great One's work even after its defeat? The cyclical nature these questions reveal, with endings that loop back to beginnings, with caretakers raising new Great Ones to replace fallen ones, embodies the very essence of what Flora represents: eternal cycles, renewal without end, spring following winter, following spring, following winter, forever and always. The Beckoning, Origins and Summoning. The story of how the moon presence came to influence the world of Bloodborne begins not with the creature's own actions, but with the desperate choices of humans who reached beyond their understanding. Specifically, it begins with Lawrence and Gehrman, two figures who would prove instrumental in shaping Yharnam's nightmare. Lawrence was once a student at Byrgenwerth, that venerable institution of higher learning where scholars sought to pierce the veil between the mundane world and the cosmic truths that lay beyond. Under the tutelage of Provost Willem, Lawrence learned of the Great Ones, those incomprehensible entities that existed on planes beyond human perception. But where Willem advocated for caution and intellectual understanding, seeking to line one's brain with eyes through insight and knowledge, Lawrence grew impatient with purely theoretical approaches. He wanted practical applications, tangible results, a way to harness the power of the Great Ones for humanity's benefit. This philosophical split led Lawrence to leave Byrgenwerth and found the Healing Church, an organization that would use old blood, the mysterious substance connected to the Great Ones, as a miracle cure for all manner of ailments. Blood ministration became the church's gift to Yharnam, and for a time it seemed to work miracles. The sick were healed, the dying given new life, and Yharnam flourished under the church's guidance. But the blood carried a terrible curse, one that would eventually transform its recipients into the very beasts that plague the game's world. As the situation deteriorated and beasts began to appear in greater numbers, the need for hunters became apparent. This is where Gehrman enters the picture. Gehrman was the first hunter, a warrior of exceptional skill who wielded the burial blade and pioneered many of the techniques and weapons that subsequent hunters would adopt. He founded the Hunter's Workshop, training others to combat the growing scourge of beasthood. But despite their best efforts, the hunters were mortal, limited by the constraints of human ability and lifespan. Gehrman also carried a profound personal tragedy. He had been mentor to Lady Maria, a skilled hunter who eventually left his service and met a mysterious fate connected to the horrors of the fishing hamlet. In his grief over Maria's loss, Gehrman created the Plain Doll, an exquisite work of craftsmanship modeled perfectly after Maria's appearance. But the doll remained an inanimate object, a painful reminder of what he had lost rather than a true replacement. Gehrman's sorrow and loneliness deepened, and in his desperation, he sought a way to transcend the limitations of the physical world. It was likely Gehrman who possessed the umbilical cord found in the abandoned old workshop, though the exact circumstances of its acquisition remain mysterious. This cord, one of 4 that can be found in the game, is described as the precursor to the umbilical cord, possessed by every infant Great One. Its description tells us, every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. The 3rd umbilical cord precipitated the encounter with the pale moon, which beckoned the hunters and conceived the hunter's dream. These words suggest the umbilical cord served as a beacon, a means of communication that transcended the barriers between our reality and the cosmic planes inhabited by the Great Ones. When this cord was used in conjunction with Lawrence and Gehrman's efforts, they created a ritual, a summoning, calling out to any Great One that might hear and answer. The moon presence responded to this summons. Why it chose to answer, when other Great Ones might have ignored or failed to perceive the call, remains open to interpretation. Perhaps Flora was particularly attuned to the frequencies of grief and loss that may have saturated the ritual. Perhaps it sensed an opportunity to find the surrogate child that all great ones desperately seek. Or perhaps it had been watching Yharnam all along, waiting for this invitation to descend and take a more active role in the city's affairs. When Flora answered the call, it did not arrive with violence or obvious demands. Instead, it offered what seemed like a gift. Using Gehrman's workshop as a template, the moon presence created the hunter's dream, a perfect replica of that familiar space existing in some otherworldly dimension. This dream would serve as a sanctuary where hunters could retreat when overwhelmed, where they could replenish supplies, strengthen their weapons, and even resurrect after death. It seemed, on the surface, like an answer to prayers, a way to create immortal hunters who could fight the beastly scourge without fear of permanent death. But gifts from cosmic entities always carry hidden costs. In exchange for creating this dream, the moon presence bound Gehrman to it, making him its eternal caretaker and prisoner. The first hunter, who had sought to transcend limitation and find comfort after loss, instead found himself trapped in an endless cycle, unable to truly live or die, forced to guide hunter after hunter through the same eternal night. The contract established by this summoning extended beyond Gehrman. The moon presence gained the ability to conscript hunters into its service, binding them to the dream through blood transfusions performed by the Healing Church's blood ministers. These hunters would receive pale blood, a special type of blood that connected them to the dream and made them resistant to the full effects of the scourge. In return, they would hunt beasts and, more significantly, hunt other great ones, reducing potential rivals to the moon presence's power. A note found in the lecture building explicitly states, "The nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates. Pale blood." This note confirms that Lawrence was directly involved in the summoning ritual, and it also links the moon presence to the mysterious concept of pale blood, a connection we will explore in greater depth shortly. The note's description of the moon presence as beckoned, rather than summoned or bound, is telling. The Great One came willingly, responding to the call rather than being forced or coerced. This willing participation suggests that the moon presence saw value in the arrangement, that it had its own goals that aligned with providing the hunter's dream. The timing of this beckoning remains somewhat ambiguous, but we can infer that it occurred after the formation of the Healing Church, after the scourge of beasts had become a serious problem, and after both Lawrence and Gehrman had reached points of desperation. It likely happened relatively late in the timeline of events, perhaps even after the hunter's workshop had already been active for some time. The creation of the dream represents an escalation, a turn from mundane solutions to cosmic interventions, and such escalations typically occur only when conventional methods have failed. Some scholars of Bloodborne's lore propose that the moon presence may have played a role in Yharnam's events, even before being explicitly summoned. They point to the blood moon that appears earlier in the region's history, to the ancient Pythagorean civilization's interactions with celestial forces, and to the pervasive presence of moon-related imagery throughout the game. In this interpretation, Lawrence and Gehrman did not introduce a new factor to Yharnam's situation, but rather formalized a relationship with a force that had always been watching, always waiting for the opportunity to intervene more directly. Whether this reading holds weight remains a matter of ongoing debate among those who study the game's lore. The act of beckoning the moon presence can be seen as the pivotal mistake that sealed Yharnam's fate. Had Lawrence and Gehrman not reached out to the cosmos, had they not used the umbilical cord to bridge the gap between worlds, perhaps the situation in Yharnam would have remained a human problem with human solutions. The beasts might have been contained or eliminated, the Healing Church's errors might have been corrected, and the city might have survived. But by inviting a Great One into their affairs, they introduced something fundamentally incompatible with human existence, something that operates according to alien logics and pursues goals that may have nothing to do with human welfare. Yet it would be too simple to cast Lawrence and Gehrman as villains who doomed their world through hubris and foolishness. They acted from desperation, grief, and a genuine desire to save their city from a plague they didn't fully understand. The tragedy of their story lies not in malicious intent, but in the eternal truth that cosmic forces do not care about human concerns, that great ones pursue their own unknowable agendas, and that any deal with such entities will inevitably favor the inhuman party. The moon presence's willingness to answer the beckoning, to create the hunter's dream, and bind itself to this particular world, reveals something important about its nature. Unlike some great ones who seem entirely disconnected from humanity, content to exist in their own dimensions, Flora actively chose to engage with the mortal realm. It accepted a contract, created a space that humans could comprehend and use, and provided tools that hunters could employ against their enemies. This willingness to interact, to provide what appears to be assistance, distinguishes the moon presence from more alien great ones, while simultaneously making its true motives all the more difficult to discern. The hunter's dream, sanctuary or prison. The hunter's dream stands as the moon presence's most tangible creation, a space that serves as hub and home for every hunter bound to Flora's service. At first glance, it appears as a sanctuary, a beautiful garden of white flowers surrounding a workshop where hunters can rest, resupply, and escape the horrors of Yharnam. But like everything connected to the Great Ones, the dream is far more complex than its surface appearance suggests, functioning simultaneously as safe haven, prison, tool, and test. Physically, the hunter's dream is an exact replica of Gehrman's original workshop, the building where the first hunter trained his students and refined his craft. The structure exists in some otherworldly dimension, accessible only to those who have received the blood transfusion that binds them to the dream. When a hunter closes their eyes at one of the many lamps scattered throughout Yharnam and its surrounding areas, they transport to this space, leaving their physical body behind in the waking world while their consciousness travels to the dream. The workshop building itself serves multiple functions. Inside, hunters find a memory altar where they can level up their attributes using blood echoes, the crystallized essence of the lives they've taken. The plain doll facilitates this process, channeling the echoes into the hunter's growth. There is also a space for weapon modification and repair, where hunters can fortify their trick weapons and install blood gems to enhance their properties. Storage containers allow hunters to hold excess items, managing their inventory without being encumbered during the hunt. Outside the workshop, the landscape of the dream extends into the distance, though much of it remains inaccessible to hunters. Vast fields of lumen flowers stretch toward horizons that seem both infinite and claustrophobic, creating an impression of endless space that nonetheless feels confined. Scattered throughout this garden are numerous gravestones, each one representing a different location in the waking world that the hunter can travel to. These headstones serve as the dream's fast travel system, allowing hunters to move between distant locations instantaneously. The Bath Messengers, strange creatures that seem native to the dream, run a shop near the workshop. These beings, described by some as resembling pale, fetus-like humanoids, offer various items for purchase in exchange for blood echoes or insight. Their presence raises questions about the dream's ecosystem. Are they servants of the moon presence, creatures it brought from elsewhere, or entities that naturally inhabit this otherworldly space? The game provides no clear answers, but their helpfulness to hunters suggests they are, at minimum, part of the dream's designed functionality. As the game progresses and the hunter defeats more bosses, the state of the hunter's dream begins to change. After the hunter defeats Murgo's wet nurse and completes the ritual in the Nightmare of Mensis, the workshop building catches fire. Flames consume its exterior, though the interior remains accessible and functional. This burning represents the dream beginning to unravel, a sign that the hunt is reaching its conclusion, and that the contract binding the hunter to this place is nearing its end. The doll's dialogue changes during this phase, acknowledging that dawn will soon break and the dream will end. The true nature of the hunter's dream reveals itself through careful consideration of its rules and limitations. Hunters bound to the dream cannot permanently die while the night continues. When killed in the waking world, they simply awaken back in the dream, their bodies restored, their supplies partially replenished. This resurrection is the dream's greatest gift, creating warriors who can throw themselves at impossible odds without fear of true death. But this gift is also a curse. because it traps hunters in an endless cycle of violence. Every hunter who enters the dream follows a familiar pattern. They awaken surrounded by flowers, receive guidance from Gehrman, are sent out to hunt beasts, die and resurrect repeatedly, and eventually complete their contract by slaying specific targets chosen by the moon presence. Most hunters then accept Gehrman's offer of release, dying in the dream so they can wake in the world of the living. But a small number refuse, and these hunters must face either eternal service as the new host of the dream, or, if they have consumed enough forbidden knowledge, a confrontation with Flora itself. The dream's resemblance to Gehrman's original workshop is significant. It suggests that the moon presence created this space specifically for Gehrman, modeling it after familiar surroundings to make his imprisonment more bearable. The inclusion of the doll, an animate version of the lifeless creation Gehrman crafted in Maria's image, further personalizes the dream for its first prisoner. These touches of familiarity and comfort demonstrate that Flora is not entirely cruel, that it understands human need for familiar surroundings and companionship even as it binds humans to eternal service. Yet the dream is fundamentally a tool of manipulation and control. The moon presence uses it to recruit hunters, granting them power and immortality in exchange for directing their violence toward specific targets. These targets, as revealed through the game's progression, are often other Great Ones or entities connected to them. The player hunter slays Ram, the vacuous spider, defeats the celestial emissary and Ibrietis, daughter of the cosmos, and ultimately confronts Murgo's wet nurse. Each of these beings represents a Great One or is directly connected to one, suggesting that Flora uses hunters as assassins against cosmic rivals. This revelation transforms our understanding of the hunter's dream from sanctuary to weapon. Hunters are not primarily meant to save Yharnam from the scourge of beasts, at least not according to this interpretation. They exist to eliminate other Great Ones that pose threats to the moon presence. The beast hunting, under this reading, becomes merely training, preparation for the true task of killing cosmic entities. By framing this as noble work, as ending the nightmare that grips Yharnam, Flora ensures hunters pursue their targets with righteous fervor, never suspecting they might be pawns in conflicts beyond their comprehension. The dream's relationship to time adds another layer of strangeness. In the waking world, the night seems to stretch on indefinitely, with the hunt continuing far longer than any normal darkness. This temporal distortion likely stems from the dream's influence, with Flora potentially manipulating the flow of time to ensure its hunters have ample opportunity to complete their tasks. The note in the hunter's dream that reads, "To escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts, lest the night carry on forever," suggests the dream perpetuates the night, extending it beyond natural limits to maintain its hold on bound hunters. Comparing the hunter's dream to its real-world counterpart, the abandoned old workshop, reveals how the moon presence modified the space. The original workshop stands in ruins in the waking world, locked away and forgotten beneath Yharnam proper. It is dark, decrepit, and empty except for memories and the umbilical cord left behind. The dream version is pristine, well-lit, and alive with purpose. This contrast highlights the dream's nature as an idealized, preserved version of a space that no longer exists in reality, a perfect memory made manifest by cosmic power. The presence of multiple gravestones in the dream, one for each hunter who has served and been released, creates an ever-growing cemetery. These markers memorialize those who accepted Gehrman's offer of death and returned to the waking world. If we accept that many hunters have passed through the dream over the years, this graveyard must be extensive, representing hundreds or thousands of souls who hunted at Flora's behest before earning their release. The hunter we play is merely the latest in a long line, and if they accept the second ending by defeating Gehrman, they join this line themselves, becoming the new host, while the first hunter presumably finds peace in death. The question of whether the hunter's dream is a net positive or negative for humanity remains open to interpretation. On one hand, it provides invaluable assistance in combating the beastly scourge, creating super soldiers who can die and resurrect, who gain power from their victories, and who never tire in their mission. Without the dream, Yharnam might have been completely overrun by beasts long ago. On the other hand, the dream perpetuates the situation it claims to solve, extending the night indefinitely and binding hunters to serve the moon presence's agenda rather than humanity's best interests. Perhaps most troublingly, the dream offers an illusion of choice while fundamentally limiting the hunter's options. They can choose when to return to the dream, which weapons to upgrade, which bosses to fight first. But they cannot choose to leave before completing their contract. They cannot choose to stop hunting. The only real choice comes at the end, when they must decide whether to accept death and release, embrace eternal servitude, or challenge Flora itself for dominance. Until that moment, they remain bound, their will subordinate to the dream's requirements. Pale blood. The name that defines everything. Few concepts in Bloodborne provoke as much discussion and debate as pale blood. This mysterious term appears at the very beginning of the game, in a note left in Iosefka's clinic. Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. It appears again in connection with the moon presence, and according to game director Hidetaka Miyazaki, it can be interpreted in multiple ways, each offering different insights into the game's deeper meanings. The first mention of pale blood comes from the blood minister, who administers the transfusion that begins the player's journey. When the hunter mentions pale blood, the minister responds, "Oh yes, pale blood. Well, you've come to the right place." This exchange, brief as it is, establishes that the hunter came to Yharnam specifically seeking pale blood, that this was their goal before the nightmare began. The Japanese version of the game makes clear that the note in Iosefka's clinic was written by the hunter themselves, meaning they possessed knowledge of pale blood even before arriving in the cursed city. For much of the game, pale blood remains an enigma. No one the hunter meets seems to know what it is or where it might be found. The term disappears from the narrative entirely until late in the game, when the hunter reaches the unseen village of Yahar'gul. There, after being kidnapped by a snatcher or traveling there through other means, a note can be found that reads, "Behold, a pale blood sky." This note appears at a specific time, after the blood moon has risen, but before Ram the vacuous spider has been defeated. The significance of this note lies in what it describes. When the player first arrives at Yahar'gul, they cannot yet see the true nature of the sky, lacking sufficient insight to pierce the veil that hides cosmic truths. But after certain conditions are met, the sky becomes visible, revealing a pale blue color reminiscent of a body drained of blood. This is the pale blood sky, and according to Miyazaki, this represents one interpretation of what the term means: the color of the sky after the blood moon has descended, after the ritual of the school of Mensis has been revealed. In an interview, Miyazaki explained, "One interpretation is the color of the sky after the player defeats Ram and the Mensis secret ritual is revealed. The sky there is a very pale blue, like a body drained of blood. Before the ritual is revealed, when the player is kidnapped and goes to Yahar'gul, they don't know what it could mean yet. Then, after the ritual, they could look at it again, and it'll dawn on them." This first interpretation suggests that seeking pale blood means uncovering the truth behind the blood moon and the cosmic forces manipulating Yharnam, then putting a stop to these machinations. Under this reading, the hunter's quest to find pale blood is a quest to understand and end the nightmare that grips the city. By defeating Ram, the hunter lifts the veil. By stopping the Mensis ritual and slaying Murgo's wet nurse, they halt the source of the spreading scourge. In this way, they find pale blood by exposing the pale sky and transcend the hunt by ending it. But Miyazaki offered a second interpretation as well. That's another interpretation. Pale blood is another name for the monster that comes from the moon under certain conditions. This statement directly identifies the moon presence itself as pale blood, or at least as one valid interpretation of what the term represents. The lecture building note reinforces this reading. The nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates. Pale blood. Here, pale blood is not a condition or a color, but an entity, the very great one that rules the hunter's dream. If we accept the moon presence as pale blood, the hunter's quest takes on new meaning. Seeking pale blood becomes seeking the moon presence itself, either to confront it, to understand it, or possibly to become it. The note's instruction to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt would then mean the hunter must find and defeat Flora to truly escape the cycle of hunting and dreaming. This interpretation aligns with the childhood's beginning ending, where the hunter does exactly that, slaying the moon presence and transforming into an infant great one in the process. A third, more esoteric interpretation has been proposed by dedicated members of the Bloodborne community, most notably detailed in a comprehensive community analysis called the Pale Blood Hunt. This theory suggests that pale blood refers to a specific type of blood characterized by its pale color and unique properties. According to this interpretation, pale blood is blood that lacks red blood cells, similar to serum in medical terminology. This pale, almost colorless blood would be found in kin, those entities that have partially transformed into cosmic beings while retaining some human characteristics. The pale blood theory proposes that certain individuals possess this unique blood type naturally, making them resistant to the scourge of beasthood while simultaneously making them susceptible to kin transformation. Under this interpretation, the hunter might be one such individual, their pale blood nature potentially explaining why they can resist the beast transformation that claims so many others, why they can consume umbilical cords without immediately going mad, and why they ultimately possess the potential to become a great one themselves. Supporting this biological interpretation is evidence scattered throughout the game. Kin enemies, when struck, bleed a pale amber fluid rather than red blood. Celestial emissaries, the evolved mob enemies found in Aes and the Upper Cathedral Ward, appear to have undergone a transformation driven by their blood becoming more cosmic and less human. The blue elixir used to temporarily transform into kin describes itself as containing phantasms, slug-like creatures connected to the Great Ones. All of this suggests a spectrum of blood types in Bloodborne, with normal red blood at one end, beast blood darkened and thickened in the middle, and pale blood, pale and cosmic, at the other end. Some scholars have drawn connections between pale blood and historical medical conditions, particularly anemia. In the Victorian era setting that Bloodborne draws inspiration from, anemia caused by iron deficiency would render patients pale, weak, and listless. Their blood, lacking sufficient red blood cells, would indeed be paler than healthy blood. Sufferers of severe anemia were said to have a deathly pallor, as if the color had been drained from their bodies. This historical context adds weight to the biological interpretation of pale blood. The Moon Rune, which increases the number of blood echoes received from slain enemies, provides another connection between the moon presence and blood. The rune depicts the pale moon and enhances the hunter's ability to harvest blood echoes, suggesting that the moon itself, or the Great One associated with it, has some intrinsic connection to blood and its mystical properties. The fact that blood echoes become more plentiful under the moon's influence implies that lunar forces actively interact with blood-based mechanics in Yharnam. When we consider all these interpretations together, a picture emerges of pale blood as a multifaceted concept serving different symbolic purposes. It is simultaneously the color of the sky when truth is revealed, the name or nature of the moon presence itself, and a type of blood associated with cosmic transformation. These meanings need not be mutually exclusive. In From Software's typical fashion, ambiguity and multiple valid readings create a richer narrative tapestry than any single definitive answer could provide. The instruction to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt takes on profound significance when considered in light of all these meanings. If pale blood is the sky's color, seeking it means seeking truth and revelation. If pale blood is the moon presence, seeking it means confronting the architect of the dream itself. If pale blood is a blood type, seeking it means embracing transformation and evolution towards something beyond human. In each case, transcending the hunt requires the hunter to move beyond their initial role, to become something more than a simple warrior killing beasts at Flora's command. The revelation of pale blood, in whatever form it takes, represents the moment when the hunter understands the true nature of their situation. They are not just hunting beasts to save a city. They are participating in cosmic conflicts between great ones, serving an entity whose motivations remain alien and unknowable. To seek pale blood is to seek understanding, and with that understanding comes the possibility of choice. Accept your role, embrace eternal service, or challenge the cosmic order itself. The Blood Moon, Flora's crimson companion. The blood moon hangs heavy in Bloodborne's sky, a crimson orb that seems far too close, far too aware, far too alive. It is not merely a celestial body, but a presence, a force that warps reality around it. And it is inextricably linked to the moon presence, perhaps serving as Flora's true form, or its home, or a symbol of its power made manifest in the mortal realm. Throughout Yharnam's history, the appearance of the blood moon has heralded disaster. Ancient records from the Thumerian civilization mention the blood moon hanging low over the land of Loran, its presence coinciding with the first outbreak of the Scourge of Beasts. The combination of the blood moon's descent and the use of old blood from the Great Ones triggered transformations that ravaged the population, turning humans into savage creatures that knew only hunger and violence. In the game's present, the blood moon rises after the hunter defeats Rom the vacuous spider. This massive kin creature served as a barrier, a seal that kept the full horror of Yharnam's situation hidden behind a veil of ignorance. With Rom dead, the illusion shatters. The blood moon becomes visible in the sky, hanging low and red, casting everything in a crimson light. Lesser amygdalas that were previously invisible to hunters with low insight become permanently visible. The world fundamentally changes, revealing itself as it truly is, a place where cosmic horrors lurk around every corner, where the boundaries between dimensions have worn thin, and where reality itself bends under the weight of otherworldly influence. A note found at Byrgenwerth speaks to the blood moon's significance. When the red moon hangs low, the line between man and beast is blurred, and when the Great Ones descend, a womb will be blessed with child. This description confirms that the blood moon is not just an astronomical phenomenon, but a signal of Great One activity. Its descent marks moments when the barriers between the cosmic realm and the material world weaken, allowing Great Ones to interact more directly with humanity. The second part of that note reveals another troubling aspect of the blood moon: its connection to impregnation and reproduction. When the blood moon appears, wombs are blessed, or perhaps cursed, with children. But these are not normal children. They are the offspring of Great Ones attempting to procreate through human surrogates. Throughout Bloodborne, we see evidence of this phenomenon. Ariana, if sent to Uden Chapel and kept safe throughout the hunt, becomes mysteriously pregnant despite no apparent father. After the blood moon rises, she gives birth to a celestial child, a small slug-like creature that drops an umbilical cord when killed. This was Uden's attempt to create offspring, using a human woman as a surrogate without her knowledge or consent. The relationship between the moon presence and the blood moon is complex and never fully explained. Some interpret the two as one and the same, with the blood moon serving as the moon presence's true form, a cosmic entity so vast that it appears as a celestial body. When Flora descends to the hunter's dream in the childhood's beginning ending, it emerges directly from the blood moon, as if that crimson orb serves as a doorway or vessel. This visual connection strongly suggests that the moon presence resides within or upon the moon, using it as a base from which to observe and influence the world below. Others interpret the blood moon as a manifestation of the moon presence's power, rather than the creature itself. In this reading, Flora's descent into the mortal realm causes the moon to turn red, much like how a blood vessel might engorge with blood when pressure increases. The moon becomes a symptom of the moon presence's proximity, a warning sign that a Great One draws near. A third interpretation suggests that the blood moon is a tool or beacon used by multiple Great Ones, not just the moon presence. The note at Byrgenwerth mentions Great Ones in plural, suggesting that when the red moon hangs low, multiple cosmic entities may descend simultaneously. The School of Mensis used their ritual to beckon Murgo, and this ritual coincides with the blood moon's appearance. Uden, the formless Great One, takes advantage of the blood moon to impregnate women throughout Yharnam. The moon presence also appears most prominently during this time. Perhaps the blood moon represents a cosmic alignment, a specific configuration, when the barriers between worlds grow thin and all manner of eldritch beings can reach through. The phrase, "when the red moon hangs low," appears multiple times in the game, always imbued with ominous significance. A note in Old Yharnam reads, "The red moon hangs low, and beasts rule the streets. Are we left no other choice than to burn it all to cinders?" This note references the decision to burn Old Yharnam to prevent the spread of the scourge, suggesting that the blood moon's appearance escalated the beast plague to the point where drastic measures became necessary. Interestingly, the moon in Bloodborne does not behave like our moon in reality. It hangs suspiciously close to the ground, low enough that clouds pass both in front of and behind it. This positioning suggests that the moon exists within Yharnam's atmosphere rather than in space, making it a local phenomenon rather than an astronomical one. This atmospheric moon reinforces the interpretation that what we see in the sky is not a natural celestial body, but rather a manifestation of otherworldly power. The blood moon's color itself carries symbolic weight. Red is the color of blood, of course, but also of danger, passion, and transformation. When the moon turns red in the game, it signals that the night of the hunt has entered its most dangerous phase, that the time for pretense and half measures has ended. Everything becomes more intense, more real, more deadly. Enemies grow stronger, new threats appear, and the hunter must face truths they could previously ignore. Some players have noted that different areas in the game display different moon phases or colors even after Ram is defeated. The moon might appear white in one zone while remaining blood red in another. These inconsistencies have sparked debate about whether the blood moon is a physical phenomenon affecting all of Yharnam uniformly, or whether it represents a more subjective, perception-based state that different individuals or locations experience differently. The moon rune, which increases blood echo acquisition, provides gameplay mechanics that tie the moon to blood and power. When equipped, this rune grants up to a 20% increase in echoes gained from slain enemies, depending on the rune's level. The connection is clear. The moon, whether pale or red, enhances blood-based power in tangible ways. Those who align themselves with lunar forces gain greater strength from the blood of their victims. In the hunter's dream, the moon undergoes its own transformation. Initially, it appears as a full moon casting pale light over the garden. As the game progresses and the workshop catches fire, the moon changes, becoming the blood moon that signals the hunt's end. This transformation in the dream parallels the transformation in the waking world, suggesting that the two realms are fundamentally connected, that changes in one reflect or cause changes in the other. The blood moon's presence during the final confrontation with Gehrman and the moon presence creates a dramatic visual backdrop for the game's climactic moments. The crimson light casts everything in shades of red and black, creating an atmosphere of finality and cosmic significance. When the moon presence descends from this red moon, the visual confirmation of their connection could not be clearer. Flora emerges from the very source of the red light, materializing from the blood moon as if stepping through a curtain between worlds. The tragedy of the great ones, children lost and sought. Central to understanding the moon presence is recognizing its place within the broader tragedy that afflicts all great ones, the loss of their children and the desperate, ultimately futile search for surrogates to replace them. This theme of lost offspring and parental yearning runs throughout Bloodborne, creating a sense of cosmic sorrow that underscores the horror of the game's events. The umbilical cord descriptions tell us repeatedly, every great one loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. This simple statement reveals the fundamental vulnerability of these supposedly omnipotent beings. Despite their cosmic power, their ability to warp reality and transcend mortal limitations, the Great Ones cannot successfully reproduce. Their children are stillborn, taken by some force or circumstance beyond even Great One control, leaving these entities with an emptiness that drives much of their interaction with humanity. We see evidence of this tragedy throughout the game. Queen Yharnam, the the Pthumerian ruler encountered in the depths of the Chalice dungeons and at the threshold of Murgo's loft, carries the umbilical cord of her lost child, Murgo. Her mournful presence, the way she cradles her belly despite the child no longer being there, speaks to the devastating grief of a mother separated from her offspring. Murgo itself exists only as a crying voice, never seen, never truly present, despite being the focus of an entire nightmare realm. Kos, the Great One whose corpse washes up on the shore of the fishing hamlet, suffered perhaps the cruelest fate. She gave birth to the orphan of Kos, but this happened only after her death, and possibly because of it. The orphan, born from its mother's corpse, serves as both the guardian of the hunter's nightmare and a symbol of birthing gone horribly wrong. Even in death, Kos could not protect her child, and that failure reverberates through reality, creating a nightmare that traps hunters in an eternal cycle of violence. Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, dwells in the upper cathedral ward, protecting or mourning over what appears to be a failed attempt at reproduction. The creature seems to be crying constantly, its strange, mewling cries suggesting deep sorrow. Near Ebrietas, players can find evidence of the Healing Church's experiments attempting to facilitate Great One reproduction or to create kin, those halfway transformed beings that might serve as surrogates or offspring. The celestial emissaries, those strange blue creatures found in the Upper Cathedral Ward and the Chalice, represent another type of reproductive failure. These beings were once human, but transformed into kin through experiments with Great One essence. They are described as messengers or envoys to the Great Ones, but their existence is pitiful, their intelligence limited, their forms uncomfortable amalgamations of human and cosmic. They are not true children, but rather failed approximations, close enough to provoke hope, but fundamentally inadequate. Given this context, the Moon Presence's motivations become clearer. Like all Great Ones, Flora yearns for a surrogate child. The creation of the hunter's dream can be understood as an elaborate mechanism to produce such a child. By binding hunters to the dream, granting them power, and guiding them through increasingly difficult challenges, the Moon Presence might be testing them, cultivating them, preparing them to serve as suitable surrogates. The consumption of umbilical cords becomes crucial to this interpretation. These cords are the precursors to umbilical cords possessed by infant Great Ones, items of immense power that grant insight and, in sufficient quantity, transform the consumer's very nature. When a hunter consumes 3 umbilical cords, they elevate themselves toward Great One status, lining their brain with eyes and gaining understanding of cosmic truths. This transformation makes them uncontrollable by the Moon Presence's normal methods, resisting the embrace that would trap them in Gehrman's role. The childhood's beginning-ending, where the hunter defeats the Moon Presence and transforms into an infant Great One, represents the successful creation of what Flora has sought all along, a surrogate child. The irony, of course, is that this success comes only through the Moon Presence's defeat. The hunter kills Flora and takes its place, becoming the new cosmic entity presiding over the dream. In a sense, the Moon Presence finally achieves surrogate parenthood, but only by being replaced by its own creation, by dying so that something new can be born. The Plain Doll's role in this process adds another layer of meaning. After the hunter transforms into an infant Great One, the doll picks up the small, slug-like creature and begins caring for it. "Are you cold?" she asks, her voice filled with maternal warmth. "Oh, good hunter." She cradles the newborn Great One just as the statues throughout the game depict the Moon Presence cradling something in its arms. The doll becomes the surrogate mother to this new cosmic entity, continuing the cycle of care and nurturing that Flora itself might have wished to provide. This ending raises profound questions about the nature of Great One reproduction. Can they only create successors by dying and being replaced? Is true reproduction impossible for them Because of some fundamental limitation in their nature, or because of some external curse affecting all cosmic beings? The game provides no clear answers, but the pattern is consistent. Every Great One we encounter has lost its child, and every attempt to find a surrogate either fails or succeeds only through transformation and replacement rather than true birth. The school of Mensis attempted to commune with Murgo using an umbilical cord, seeking audience with the infant Great One. The result was catastrophic. The stillbirth of their brains, as the item description notes. The members of the school lost their minds, trapped in a nightmare realm while their leader Mikolash raves about eyes and insight. Their attempt to create a connection with Murgo, perhaps to serve as his surrogates or to gain knowledge from him, ended in complete failure. Provost Willem of Bergenwerth sought umbilical cords as well, hoping to use them to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a Great One by lining his brain with eyes. Whether he succeeded is unclear. We find him at Bergenwerth, aged beyond measure, unable or unwilling to speak, simply pointing at the lake where Rom waits. Has he achieved some form of enlightenment, or has his attempt to ascend left him broken and diminished? The Healing Church's experiments with Great One blood and the creation of kin represent another angle on the same problem. If Great Ones cannot produce natural offspring, perhaps humans can be transformed into acceptable substitutes. The Church attempted this through blood ministration, through direct exposure to Great One essence, through surgeries and experiments. The results fill the upper cathedral ward: failed kin, broken experiments, creatures trapped between human and cosmic states, suffering in their half-transformed condition. Against this backdrop of consistent failure and tragedy, the hunter's potential to become an infant Great One stands out as genuinely unique. Unlike the school of Mensis, whose attempt at communion destroyed their minds, the hunter consumes umbilical cords and retains both sanity and will. Unlike the Healing Church's experiments, which produced only kin, the hunter achieves full transformation into a true Great One, even if only in infant form. Unlike Willem, who may have achieved insight but lost himself in the process, the hunter transcends while maintaining identity. The Plain Doll's promise to raise this infant Great One introduces the possibility of a new cycle beginning. If Great Ones cannot raise their own children but can be nurtured by others, then perhaps the hunter's transformation represents a solution to the cosmic tragedy. The doll, herself a creation touched by Great One power, becomes the bridge between human and cosmic, the caretaker who can provide what natural Great One parents seemingly cannot. This theme of lost children and yearned-for surrogates adds emotional depth to entities that might otherwise seem too alien to sympathize with. The Great Ones, for all their power and incomprehensibility, suffer. They experience loss and long for connection. Their attempts to interact with humanity, however disastrous, stem from a genuine need rather than pure malice. The moon presence becomes slightly less monstrous when we understand it as a bereaved parent seeking to fill an emptiness that nothing in the cosmos can satisfy. 3 paths, 3 endings. The hunter's fate. After slaying Murgo's wet nurse and completing the hunt's primary objective, every hunter bound to the dream must make a choice that determines their ultimate fate. This decision point, occurring in the burning workshop as dawn approaches, offers 3 distinct endings that reflect different interpretations of what it means to escape the nightmare. Each ending reveals something about the nature of the hunter's dream, the moon presence's intentions, and the price of freedom. The first ending, Yarnum Sunrise, is also the simplest to achieve. When Gehrman offers to free the hunter from the dream, the hunter need only accept. This submission triggers a cutscene where Gehrman rises from his wheelchair, scythe in hand, and approaches the kneeling hunter. His weapon falls in a smooth arc, severing the hunter's head from their body. But this is not death, it is release. The hunter awakens in Cathedral Ward as the sun rises, the long night finally ended. Bells ring in the distance, signaling that the hunt is over, at least for now. In the hunter's dream, the plain doll kneels before a new gravestone, presumably the player character's, and speaks her farewell. "Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world." The hunter has escaped, returning to reality with the dawn, freed from the eternal cycle of death and resurrection that defines existence in the dream. This ending is often described as the bad ending by players, though such a designation oversimplifies its implications. The hunter achieves what they ostensibly set out to do: survive the night, complete the hunt, and return to the waking world. They are no longer bound to the dream, no longer forced to serve the moon presence. They can presumably resume whatever life they had before coming to Yharnam, though one must wonder how anyone could return to normalcy after experiencing such horrors. Yet this ending leaves numerous questions unanswered. Has the hunter truly escaped, or merely been released to make room for the next recruit? The presence of a new gravestone in the dream, visible if one begins a new Game Plus, suggests that each hunter who accepts this ending becomes another marker in the dream's ever-growing cemetery. The scourge of beasts has not been permanently defeated. It will return, and when it does, another hunter will be bound to the dream to face it. The cycle continues, just without this particular participant. The Yharnam Sunrise ending also raises questions about memory and identity. Does the hunter remember the dream upon waking? Do they retain the power and skills they developed during the hunt? The game offers no answers, leaving players to imagine what a return to normalcy might look like for someone who has killed gods and walked through nightmares. The second ending, Honoring Wishes, begins with the hunter refusing Gehrman's offer. The first hunter's demeanor shifts immediately. He stands from his wheelchair, revealing the burial blade hidden within his walking cane, and speaks with a mixture of sorrow and determination. Dear, oh dear, what was it? The hunt, the blood, or the horrible dream? Oh, it doesn't matter. It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sorts of messes. He readies his weapons and adds, "Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt. What follows is a boss battle against Gehrman, the first hunter, one of the most elegant and challenging duels in the game. Gehrman fights with the weapon he pioneered, combining its scythe and sword forms with a hunter's blunderbuss and supernatural speed granted by the old hunter bone. He is a master of his craft, demonstrating all the skills that made him the first and greatest of hunters. The battle takes place in the Field of Flowers near the Great Tree, with the blood moon hanging overhead, bearing witness to this conflict between teacher and student. If the hunter has not consumed 3 umbilical cords, the battle with Gehrman concludes the game. Upon his defeat, the first hunter dies, and a cutscene reveals the true architect behind the dream. The moon presence descends from the blood moon, its tentacles writhing, its form alien and terrible. It approaches the victorious hunter, and the screen fades to white. When the image returns, the hunter sits in Gehrman's wheelchair, having taken his place as the host of the dream. The doll pushes the wheelchair back toward the workshop, and her words make the situation clear. And so, the hunt begins again. The hunter has freed Gehrman from his eternal service, but only by assuming that burden themselves. They are now the one who will guide future hunters, who will offer them release when their hunts conclude, who will spend eternity in the dream unable to escape. This ending carries a bitter irony. In seeking to avoid submission, the hunter condemned themselves to an even worse fate. Where accepting Gehrman's offer would have granted release, refusing it resulted in eternal imprisonment. The hunter becomes a cautionary tale about the price of defiance, about how sometimes the only way to escape a trap is to accept help rather than trying to fight free alone. Yet there is something noble in this ending as well. The hunters sacrificed their own freedom to grant peace to Gehrman, who has suffered in the dream for far longer than any hunter should. This selfless choice, even if made unknowingly, demonstrates the hunter's compassion. Moreover, the hunter now understands the dream's true nature and might be able to use their position to change how it operates, to treat future hunters with more kindness than they received, to perhaps find a way to break the cycle from within. The third ending, childhood's beginning, represents the most hidden and most consequential resolution to the game. To achieve this ending, the hunter must find and consume 3 of the 4 umbilical cords scattered throughout the game before speaking with Gehrman. These cords are rare and missable, requiring careful exploration and specific actions at specific times. Most players will not encounter this ending on their first playthrough, discovering it only through guides or multiple attempts. When the hunter has consumed 3 umbilical cords and refuses Gehrman's offer, the battle proceeds as in the second ending. But after Gehrman falls, when the moon presence descends and attempts to embrace the hunter, something different happens. A shining light erupts from the hunter's body, pushing back against Flora's grasp. The moon presence recoils, shaking its head in what might be surprise or rage. It lets out a cry and then attacks, initiating the game's true final boss battle. The fight against the moon presence is, ironically, easier than the battle with Gehrman that precedes it. Flora's attacks are telegraphed and relatively simple to dodge. Its most threatening ability, the gaze of the moon, drains the hunter's health to exactly 1 point, but leaves the creature exhausted for several seconds afterward, creating a window for counterattack and healing. Many players defeat the moon presence on their first attempt, especially after having learned combat patterns from Gehrman. When Flora falls, the message "Nightmare Slain" appears, distinguishing this victory from ordinary boss defeats that display prey slaughtered. A cutscene begins, showing the plain doll walking through the garden. She discovers something on the ground, a small, pale, slug-like creature with dark spots, resembling a combination of the moon presence's colors and a human infant. The doll picks up this creature gently. "Are you cold?" she asks, her voice filled with warmth and wonder. Then, with a small laugh of recognition, she adds, "Oh, good hunter." The hunter has transformed into an infant great one, transcending human limitations entirely. The trophy that pops after the cutscene clarifies the achievement. You became an infant great one, lifting humanity into its next childhood. This ending is widely considered the true ending, the most complete resolution to Bloodborne's narrative. The hunter has not merely escaped the dream or freed Gehrman, they have fundamentally changed the cosmic order. By defeating the moon presence, they have broken the cycle that trapped hunters in eternal service. By ascending to become a great one themselves, they have proven that the gulf between human and cosmic can be bridged. Yet this ending raises as many questions as it answers. What does it mean for humanity that one of their kind has ascended? The trophy mentions lifting humanity into its next childhood, suggesting that the hunter's transformation has implications for all humans, not just themselves. Will the hunter-turned-great one use their new power to help humanity to protect the world from cosmic horrors? Or will they become as alien and uncaring as the other great ones, pursuing unknowable goals while humanity suffers beneath their influence? The plain doll's role as caretaker to this infant great one suggests that the cycle might continue in modified form. Where the moon presence created the hunter's dream to cultivate potential surrogates, perhaps the new great one will maintain the dream for different purposes, or transform it into something else entirely. The doll's continued existence implies that the dream persists even after Flora's defeat, waiting for its new master to mature and assert their will over it. Some interpret this ending as ultimately tragic rather than triumphant. The hunter set out to escape the nightmare and return to humanity. Instead, they've lost their humanity entirely, transformed into something alien, reduced to an helpless infant form. Their consciousness may remain intact, trapped inside this new cosmic body, or it might have been subsumed by the transformation, leaving only instinct and cosmic awareness. The game does not tell us whether the hunter retains their identity or has become something entirely new wearing the hunter's achievements like a skin. The three endings present fundamentally different philosophies about freedom and transcendence. The first ending represents acceptance and return, choosing the familiar over the unknown. The second ending represents sacrifice and service, putting others' freedom above one's own. The third ending represents defiance and evolution, refusing to accept the limitations imposed by cosmic entities and fighting to transcend them. Each ending has merit, and From Software deliberately refuses to designate anyone as canonically correct. Players must interpret for themselves which outcome best fits their understanding of the story, which choice they believe the hunter would make, which fate seems most appropriate given everything they've experienced during the hunt. This ambiguity is itself thematically appropriate for a game steeped in Lovecraftian horror, where certainty is an illusion and truth remains forever just beyond our grasp. The battle against Flora, mechanics and meaning. When the hunter consumes 3 umbilical cords and refuses Gehrman's offer, they earn the right to face the moon presence directly in combat. This battle, the game's true final boss encounter, combines mechanical simplicity with profound thematic weight. Understanding how Flora fights reveals something about its nature and its relationship to the hunter who dares challenge it. The moon presence enters the arena with a dramatic descent from the blood moon, floating down in an almost graceful manner, despite its horrifying appearance. Its tentacles flow behind it like a bridal train, and its skeletal limbs hang loose before snapping into ready positions. The creature hovers several feet above the ground throughout the fight, never fully touching the earth, maintaining its otherworldly separation from the mortal realm even during this final confrontation. Flora's primary attack pattern consists of rapid 3-hit combinations using its elongated limbs. These strikes cover significant distance, often closing the gap between the moon presence and the hunter in an instant. The tentacles on its head whip around during these attacks, adding extra hitboxes that can catch unwary hunters attempting to dodge past the main assault. However, these combos typically leave Flora's back exposed, creating opportunities for hunters to punish the creature during its recovery frames. The moon presence also employs several ranged attacks. It can send out spectral projectiles that home in on the hunter, requiring careful dodging to avoid. More notably, at around 50% health, Flora begins using an attack where white orbs appear above its head, then explode into blood that rains down on the battlefield. This attack applies a debuff similar to the numbing mist item, temporarily preventing the hunter from healing using blood vials. The attack can be avoided by positioning behind the moon presence when it begins the casting animation. But the moon presence's most infamous attack is the Gaze of the Moon, an unavoidable area of effect ability that defines the encounter. Flora grasps its face with its hands, and brilliant light bursts forth. This light instantly reduces the hunter's health to exactly 1 point, regardless of their maximum HP or defensive stats. No amount of dodging, blocking, or positioning can prevent this attack's effect. The hunter stands on the brink of death, 1 hit away from failure. However, this devastating attack comes with a significant drawback. The moon presence requires 5 to 6 seconds to recover after using it, remaining completely stationary and vulnerable during this window. Smart hunters can exploit this opening in several ways. The rally system, which allows hunters to regain health by striking enemies shortly after taking damage, remains active during this period. By immediately attacking Flora, hunters can recover most or all of the health they just lost. Alternatively, hunters can use this safe window to heal with blood vials without fear of interruption, completely negating the threat the attack posed. This design choice, making the moon presence's most powerful attack also its most exploitable weakness, seems deliberate. It creates a rhythm to the fight where the hunter must weather Flora's standard assault patterns, survive the health-draining gaze, then capitalize on the recovery period to turn the tables. The battle becomes less about avoiding damage and more about managing resources and timing aggression properly. Mechanically, the Moon Presence fight is notably easier than the Gehrman battle that immediately precedes it. Many players defeat Flora on their first attempt, especially if they come to the fight with full supplies after mastering the first hunter. This relative ease has sparked debate in the community. Some view it as a disappointing anticlimax after the emotional weight of facing Gehrman. Others interpret the lower difficulty as thematically appropriate, arguing that the hunter has grown so powerful through their journey that even a great one poses less threat than a master hunter. The fight setting reinforces its significance. The battle takes place in the same field of flowers where Gehrman fought, but the atmosphere has shifted. The blood moon hangs even lower, dominating the sky, casting everything in crimson light. The flowers seem to glow faintly, responding to the cosmic forces clashing above them. The boundaries of the arena appear to extend infinitely, as if the entirety of the hunter's dream has become a battlefield. Throughout the encounter, the Moon Presence displays no obvious emotion or reaction to the hunter's attacks. Unlike some bosses that cry out in pain or rage, Flora remains eerily silent save for the occasional screech or hiss. This absence of apparent suffering makes the creature seem even more alien, as if physical damage barely registers to its consciousness. Only when its health finally depletes does it show anything resembling distress, letting out a final cry before collapsing. The attack patterns themselves reveal something about how Flora perceives combat. Its strikes are swift but not particularly creative, following relatively predictable patterns. It does not adapt to the hunter's strategy or learn from previous exchanges. This lack of tactical evolution could suggest that the Moon Presence, for all its cosmic power, may not be particularly experienced in direct combat. Perhaps it has never needed to fight personally before, relying instead on proxies like Gehrman and the countless hunters who served the dream. The health drain attack, while mechanically unique, also carries symbolic weight. By reducing the hunter to a single point of vitality, Flora demonstrates its power over life and death. The hunter exists on the absolute edge of survival, maintained at exactly 1 HP rather than being killed outright. This precision could suggest control and purpose. Perhaps Flora is not actually trying to kill the hunter, but rather to dominate them, to force submission by bringing them to the very threshold of death without crossing it. The fact that this attack is unavoidable reinforces the Moon Presence's cosmic nature. Mortal attacks can be dodged, blocked, or endured through physical prowess. But Flora's gaze transcends such limitations. It simply happens, warping reality to achieve its effect. The hunter cannot avoid it through skill or preparation. They can only endure it and respond. This mechanic captures the Lovecraftian theme of humans being ultimately powerless before cosmic forces, able to persist only through adaptation and resilience, rather than through preventing the inevitable. The battlefield itself, the flower garden that comprises much of the hunter's dream, takes on new meaning during this fight. These flowers, possibly planted or cultivated by Flora, serve as the ground for the very battle that will determine whether the Moon Presence continues its rule. The hunter literally fights on Flora's garden, trampling the symbols of its power while striking at the Great One itself. Victory means not just defeating an enemy, but claiming this space, transforming it from Flora's domain into something new. Some players have noted that the Moon Presence can be locked onto even before the battle begins, during the cutscene where it first appears after Gehrman's defeat. This technical quirk allows prepared hunters to get a small advantage, though it doesn't dramatically affect the fight's difficulty. More importantly, it suggests that the Moon Presence is truly present in physical form rather than being merely a vision or projection. The hunter fights the real Flora, not an avatar or messenger. The trophy that appears upon victory, Nightmare Slain, distinguishes this achievement from regular boss kills that display Prey Slaughtered. This language choice is significant. The hunter has not merely killed prey, they have ended a nightmare. The moon presence is equated with the nightmare itself, suggesting that Flora was not just a participant in Yharnam's horror, but potentially a fundamental source of it. Whether the moon presence truly created the nightmare or simply sustained it through the hunter's dream remains open to interpretation, though the cutscene that follows immediately complicates this reading. Theories and interpretations. Unraveling Flora's truth. The ambiguity surrounding the moon presence has spawned numerous theories attempting to explain its nature, motivations, and role in Bloodborne's narrative. While From Software deliberately leaves many questions unanswered, careful examination of the game's evidence allows us to construct several compelling interpretations of who or what Flora truly is. One of the most developed theories proposes that the moon presence and Udin, the formless Great One, are the same entity. This interpretation draws on several pieces of evidence scattered throughout the game. Multiple item descriptions reference Udin as formless, existing only as voice and thought, rather than possessing a physical body. Yet we know that Great Ones can manifest in different ways, and what appears formless to human perception might simply be beyond our ability to comprehend. The connection between Odin and blood is well established in the game's lore. The Odin Writhe rune states that Odin's essence dwells in blood, and those who swear the corruption oath become Odin's inadvertent worshippers through their obsession with blood. The moon presence's deep connection to blood, its role in creating the blood-based mechanics of the hunter's dream, and the pale blood sky all align with Udin's nature. Furthermore, Udin is explicitly stated to impregnate women when the blood moon descends. Ariana's mysterious pregnancy occurs after the blood moon appears, and the child she births drops an umbilical cord described as being connected to Eden. If the moon presence is synonymous with the blood moon, as the visual evidence strongly suggests, then the moon presence facilitating these impregnations makes sense. Flora would be Eden's physical manifestation, the form the Formless One takes when it descends into the material realm. This theory elegantly explains several otherwise confusing elements. The lecture hall note linking pale blood to the moon presence connects to Aden's blood-based nature. The creation of the hunter's dream through blood contracts aligns with Aden's preference for blood-based communion. Even the name Flora, associated with growth and fertility, fits with Aden's role in creating offspring through human surrogates. However, this theory faces challenges. If the moon presence is Udin, why does the game present them as separate entities in its item descriptions? Multiple texts mention Udin as if it were distinct from other Great Ones, never directly equating it with the moon presence. The formless nature of Udin seems fundamentally incompatible with Flora's very physical, very visible form. These contradictions have prevented the Eden theory from achieving universal acceptance in the lore community. An alternative interpretation presents the moon presence as a benevolent Great One attempting to save humanity from its own mistakes. In this reading, Flora created the hunter's dream, not to serve its own interests, but to provide humanity with the tools needed to survive the scourge of beasts. The dream gives humans immortality and power, transforming them into effective weapons against threats they could not otherwise face. Evidence for this benevolent interpretation includes the moon presence's apparent goal of eliminating other Great Ones. The hunter's path through the game involves killing Rom, Ebrietas, the celestial emissary, and Murgo's wet nurse, all Great Ones or entities serving them. If these beings threaten humanity, then Flora's use of hunters to eliminate them could be seen as protective rather than manipulative. Additionally, the hunter's dream provides genuine benefits without obvious traps. Hunters gain power, resurrect from death, and receive guidance from Gehrman and the doll. Yes, they are bound to serve, but in exchange they become capable of feats impossible for normal humans. If Flora wanted to exploit hunters, it could surely extract a higher price than it does. The benevolence theory faces its own objections, however. A truly benevolent entity would presumably free hunters once the threat was eliminated, rather than keeping them bound to the dream. The manipulation of Gehrman, trapping him in eternal service against his will, seems cruel regardless of underlying motivations. And the impregnation of women without consent, if Flora is indeed responsible for this, represents a violation that's difficult to reconcile with benevolent intent. A third theory suggests that the moon presence is neither benevolent nor malicious, but simply alien, operating according to cosmic logic that defies human moral categories. Great ones exist on a different plane, perceive reality differently, and pursue goals that humans cannot comprehend. Flora's actions, which seem manipulative or controlling from our perspective, might simply be how it interacts with the world. No more moral or immoral than a human's relationship to the bacteria living in their body. This interpretation emphasizes Lovecraftian themes about the fundamental incompatibility between human understanding and cosmic truth. We cannot judge the moon presence by human standards because it is not human, has never been human, and operates according to principles we lack the capacity to grasp. The horror lies not in Flora being evil, but in it being beyond such concepts entirely. Some theorists focus on the anatomical symbolism discussed earlier, proposing that the moon presence represents humanity's own blood system turned against itself. In this reading, Flora is a manifestation of the old blood that permeates Yharnam, given form and consciousness through some unknown process. It is simultaneously the cure and the disease, the medicine and the poison, embodying the dual nature of blood as both life-giver and life-taker. This theory explains Flora's appearance, which resembles human anatomy twisted into alien configurations. It explains the blood moon, which could be understood as blood itself hanging in the sky. It explains the moon presence's interest in hunters and blood echoes, as these represent concentrated forms of the essence it embodies. Under this interpretation, defeating Flora means defeating the curse of blood itself, breaking free from the addiction and corruption that has plagued Yharnam. Yet another interpretation suggests that the moon presence is not one entity, but many, or perhaps a collective consciousness comprising multiple great ones. The note at Bergenwerth mentions, "when the great ones descend," in plural, suggesting that the blood moon's arrival heralds multiple cosmic entities, not just one. Perhaps what we call the moon presence is actually a coalition or hive mind of several great ones working together, and Flora is merely the spokesperson or representative we encounter. Some fans have proposed that the moon presence represents the collective will of dead hunters. Their lingering desires and unfulfilled missions coalesced into a single entity that creates the dream to continue the hunt eternally. This theory draws on Soul Series precedent, where concepts can gain physical form through sufficient emotional weight. The countless hunters who have died pursuing beasts might have collectively created Flora through their shared determination to continue fighting. A darker theory suggests that the moon presence is humanity's future, the final form that humans will take if they follow the path of blood ministration to its conclusion. In this reading, Flora is not an alien entity, but rather an evolutionary endpoint, what humans become when they fully embrace cosmic transformation. The infant Great One that the player becomes in the third ending represents not ascension, but a return to this natural cycle, becoming what humanity was perhaps always meant to become. Religious interpretations have also emerged, with some scholars comparing the moon presence to various mythological and theological figures. The comparison to Flora the Roman goddess has already been discussed, but other connections exist as well. Some see parallels to the Grim Reaper or other psychopomps that guide souls between worlds. Others note similarities to trickster deities that offer gifts with hidden costs, or to primordial chaos entities that predate order and civilization. The question of whether the moon presence truly dies in the third ending remains debated. When Flora falls, it certainly appears defeated, and the nightmare-slain message confirms a significant victory. But can a great one truly die? Their consciousness exists on planes beyond the physical, according to item descriptions. Perhaps what the hunter defeats is merely Flora's material manifestation, while its true essence persists elsewhere, watching and waiting for another opportunity to manifest. All these theories share a common recognition: the moon. Presence is deliberately mysterious, designed to provoke thought and discussion rather than provide easy answers. From Software's approach to storytelling values ambiguity and player interpretation over explicit narrative clarity. Flora exists in the space between what we know and what we can never fully understand, embodying the horror of the unknowable that defines Lovecraftian fiction. Legacy and the limits of understanding. As we reach the end of this exploration into the nature of the moon presence, we must acknowledge what remains forever beyond our grasp. Flora, for all the analysis and theory, ultimately resists complete understanding. This resistance is not a failure of inquiry, but rather a fundamental feature of Bloodborne's design and themes. The moon presence stands as one of the most iconic creations in From Software's catalog, a being that embodies both the studio's mastery of visual design and its commitment to narrative ambiguity. Flora has captured the imagination of players worldwide precisely because it cannot be fully explained, cannot be reduced to simple motivations or clear alignments. It exists in that liminal space between comprehension and mystery, inviting endless interpretation while never confirming any single reading as definitive. In the broader context of Bloodborne's narrative, the moon presence serves multiple crucial functions. It provides the mechanical justification for the hunter's dream and the resurrection system that defines the gameplay. It embodies the cosmic horror themes that separate Bloodborne from its Dark Souls predecessors, bringing Lovecraftian elements into sharp focus. It offers players a final test of understanding, accessible only to those who have delved deep enough into the game's secrets to consume 3 umbilical cords. Flora also represents a different kind of villain or antagonist than what players typically encounter in video games. It does not monologue, does not explain its plans, does not even acknowledge the player's existence until forced into direct confrontation. There is no moment where the moon presence reveals its scheme or provides context for its actions. It simply is, existing as an immutable force that players must accept, serve, or destroy. This approach to antagonist design reflects Bloodborne's philosophical stance on cosmic entities. The Great Ones do not exist for humanity's benefit, do not care about human concerns, and do not operate according to rules that make sense from a human perspective. Flora is not cruel any more than a hurricane is cruel. It simply acts according to its nature, and the consequences for humans caught in its wake are incidental rather than intentional. The community response to the moon presence demonstrates how effective this design approach can be. Years after Bloodborne's release, players continue debating Flora's nature, sharing theories, creating artwork, and writing essays exploring what this creature represents. The moon presence has transcended its role as a boss fight to become a cultural touchstone within gaming, a symbol of the medium's capacity for creating genuinely mysterious and thought-provoking antagonists. For aspiring game developers and narrative designers, the moon presence offers valuable lessons. Ambiguity, when skillfully employed, creates richer experiences than explicit exposition. Allowing players to interpret and debate enhances engagement beyond what clear answers could achieve. The most memorable characters are often those who retain mystery, who refuse to be fully explained or understood. Yet Flora's effectiveness depends on the careful balance From Software struck between providing enough information to enable interpretation while withholding enough to prevent definitive conclusions. Every item description, every environmental detail, Every NPC dialogue was carefully crafted to add to the overall picture without completing it. This balance is extraordinarily difficult to achieve. Tip too far toward clarity and the mystery evaporates. Tip too far toward obscurity and players become frustrated rather than engaged. The moon presence also demonstrates how visual design can communicate theme and character without words. Flora's appearance, with its tentacles and exposed spine and faceless void, immediately establishes it as otherworldly and wrong. The way it moves, floating rather than walking, attacking with impossible speed yet showing no emotion, reinforces its alien nature. Players understand that this is not something they can reason with or find common ground with simply by looking at it. As a final boss, the moon presence occupies an unusual position. It is not the most difficult encounter in the game, unlike typical From Software final bosses that test every skill the player has learned. This comparative ease has sparked discussion about whether difficulty is always necessary for a satisfying conclusion. Perhaps sometimes the final challenge should be philosophical rather than mechanical, asking players not, "Can you win?" but rather, "Should you win? What does winning mean?" The transformation of the hunter into an infant great one after defeating Flora represents one of gaming's most memorable endings, an image that lingers in the mind long after the credits roll. That small, slug-like creature, cradled in the doll's hands, somehow manages to be both horrifying and strangely innocent. It is simultaneously triumph and tragedy, ascension and loss, beginning and end. This ambivalence perfectly captures Bloodborne's thematic core. Looking at the moon presence's role in Bloodborne's broader narrative structure, Flora serves as the revelation that recontextualizes everything the player has experienced. The cozy workshop where they've spent countless hours is revealed as a prison. The helpful Gehrman is shown to be a victim himself. The resurrections that made the game playable are exposed as chains binding the hunter to cosmic service. The moon presence is the truth behind the veil, the reality that was always there but couldn't be seen until the right moment. As we conclude this exploration, it's worth reflecting on what seeking pale blood truly meant. Whether pale blood was the sky's color, the moon presence itself, or a type of blood granting cosmic understanding, the hunt for it forced the player to engage deeply with Bloodborne's mysteries. In seeking pale blood, we sought understanding. In transcending the hunt, we transcended the simple role of warrior and became scholars of cosmic horror, piecing together fragments of truth from a world designed to keep us ignorant. The moon presence, Flora, the nameless entity that descends from the blood moon, remains ultimately unknowable in its entirety. We can observe its actions, catalog its abilities, speculate about its motivations, and theorize about its nature. But we cannot fully understand it because we are not meant to. The horror of Bloodborne lies in this gap between what we desperately want to comprehend and what we are cosmically incapable of grasping. In the end, perhaps that's the most important lesson Flora teaches us. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some entities are not meant to be understood. The universe contains forces and beings that operate on scales and according to principles that human minds cannot process. We can engage with these mysteries. We can develop our own interpretations, but we must ultimately accept that complete understanding will always remain just beyond our reach. The hunter's dream continues, with or without us. The moon presence, defeated or victorious, persists in some form. The blood moon rises and falls according to cosmic rhythms we can observe but never fully predict. And somewhere in the nexus between sleeping and waking, between human and cosmic, between nightmare and reality, Flora waits. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of gaming's most enigmatic entities. If you enjoyed this exploration of Bloodborne's lore, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are so many more mysteries waiting to be examined, so many more questions demanding answers, that may never come. Until next time, may you find your worth in the waking world, good hunter. Or perhaps, may you find your way into childhood's beginning, ascending to something beyond the limitations that bound you. The choice, as always, was yours to make.